2000, my parents sat my sister and me down to announce we were moving again. As an Army brat, I was used to this conversation. We were told when and where we were moving, then shown a photo of the house. As children of two retired Army parents, I was a little confused about why we had to move in the middle of the school year, but I didn't question it. As strange as it might seem to people who've lived in the same house their whole lives, moving was normal for my family. As with every move, part of me hoped this would be the last one and that we'd finally settle into a permanent home. I didn't get excited until I saw the house in person, and boy, did I jump off the hype train quickly. For one This happened when I was 13. I lived in a duplex with my dad and brother. It was a 2-bedroom, and I shared a room with my dad while my older brother had his own. It wasn't uncommon for both of them to have plans at night while I stayed home alone playing video games. This night was no different. My dad was probably at a bar and my brother, who knows where. I was playing the original Resident Evil on PlayStation, and around midnight my eyelids got too heavy, so I decided to go to bed. I always slept with my bedroom door wide open. In the years we lived there, not once did my dad or brother come home through the back sliding glass door. A couple of times my brother forgot his key, and he'd knock on my bedroom window to ask me to let him in. My dad always had his key and always came through the front door. On this night I heard the back door slide open. It was an old door, hard to move and very loud, so I heard it crystal clear. I lay in bed wide-eyed, my imagination going crazy. I heard whoever it was walk through the dining room, through the kitchen, and into the living room. They made no attempt to be quiet. After a brief pause, I saw someone walk by my bedroom doorway. As you can imagine, my heart was pounding. Whoever was in my house went into the bathroom right next to my bedroom and flipped the light on. The light poured into my room. I lay there terrified, completely exposed in the glow from the bathroom. Why didn't I shout out for my brother or my dad? Because like I said, I knew it wasn't them, and there was no one else it could reasonably have been. Not a family member, not a friend. I knew it was someone who didn't belong. The person walked out of the bathroom, left the light on, and went into my brother's room, making a ton of noise. It sounded like they were searching for something. All I could do was lay there shivering. After a few minutes, the person walked by my bedroom again. I expected at any moment a stranger would walk in, but they didn't. Instead, I heard them making noise in the living room, walking around, huffing and puffing. Then they started pacing back and forth past my bedroom repeatedly, into the bathroom and back out over and over. At the time, I was 100% sure they were messing with me. They knew I was there, whoever they were. I could hear the noises they made. By the sounds and by the huge figure I'd glimpsed walking back and forth, I knew it was a man. He continued walking around each room except the one I was in. And then suddenly I heard him walk back through the house to the back sliding door, open it and leave. I lay there in bed terrified, wondering what the hell had just happened. After a while, sheer exhaustion took over and I fell asleep. In the morning I found my dad and brother at home. I've asked both of them dozens of times, and they swear it wasn't them. Plus, why would either of them go through the back door and then leave again through the back door? This was 21 years ago. I'll never know who it was or why they were there. Nothing was missing either. What still makes me wonder to this day is, why did they never come into my bedroom? The door was wide open, and they walked past it at least 20 times. I'm a university student living in a rental house with 5 other people. It's far from ideal, but with the current housing crisis, at least splitting the rent takes some of the sting out of paying a ton of money each month just to exist in a box. This will be relevant, I swear. Last weekend I got extremely lucky. All 5 of my roommates were out of town. This has literally never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house to myself. I did all the stereotypical 21-year-old girl, home alone, things you can think of, watching movies with the volume cranked up, taking ridiculously long showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc. Around 10 p.m., after finishing some homework, I was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching a streaming service. I thought I heard something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in the yard before, and it used to make a ton of noise out there, so I assumed that was it. But after hearing fumbling a second time, I went to check through the window. Nothing. As I turned back toward the living room, a chunk of cement flew through our kitchen window. I didn't know it was cement at the time, but that's not important. I think I might have peed a little when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little kid. My first instinct was to unlock the door and go outside, but common sense finally kicked in, and I locked it again. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't have made a difference. Oddly enough, my grandmother's words popped into my head, something her own mother had told her. If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. With my hands shaking, I managed to shut off the living room lights and turn off the TV. My dad had always given me and my siblings advice about self-protection, but none of it was resonating at the time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom, roast me if you want, and turned off every light in the house on the way up. While heading upstairs, I could hear the front doorknob shaking furiously. I don't know if there was more than one person or if they realized they couldn't jump the fence into the backyard. While calling emergency services on speakerphone, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape, probably one of the most Canadian things I've ever done. If I had to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark holding my makeshift spear for what was probably 15 minutes. I'm very glad I wasn't being murdered during that time. The operator told me police were on the way, and they eventually did arrive, though it took an unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left my bedroom was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs and saw flashing police lights through the window. Otherwise, someone would have had to physically drag me out. I gave a statement, but that was literally all they did. Nothing else. Literally. A very kind female officer stayed with me in the house and even helped me clean up the broken glass until my brother showed up to take me to his place for the rest of the weekend. Shout out to Officer Cutie with the tattoos. I've since made a doctor's appointment and started medication for anxiety and nightmares. I know I wasn't in physical danger at that point, but I've had some charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was finding it easier just to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile, but I'm human. The meds are working fine, and I'm back at the house, surrounded by wall-to-wall people again. Honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. It was the middle of summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it wasn't a big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up whenever I got hungry, and I had some money if I wanted to order pizza. Everything was fine. The first night I stayed up until 3 a.m. playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. When I checked my phone, it was a little past 1. I had plans to play street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go wild. I was in there for about 45 minutes, scrolling through Reddit and Twitter on my phone, when I heard the front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and it's loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, because obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears straining for any other sound. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents had come home early. I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check. The stairs to the kitchen, where the back door is, are narrow and walled in, like a tighter version of a staircase with a wall instead of a rail. I couldn't see into the kitchen as I went down. Even though my house is old and each step creaks loudly, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds to walk down all 12 stairs. When I got to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I took a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard more noise. And even if there were burglars in the house, there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen. After mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled at how paranoid I was being, walked the last 2 stairs normally, and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen was a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face. Just staring. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his sides. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were where you'd normally hold your arms, but he had rotated them almost completely backwards and lifted them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why this detail burned into my memory, but it was the most demonic, unnatural posture I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I realize how creepy this situation was, but in the moment, I just took a step toward him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of a half slap, half push, knocking him toward the ground. The second I connected, I bolted up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen, my heart pounding out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked the door. I quickly shoved a chair under the doorknob, like you see in TV shows. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and, nearly in tears, told the operator what happened as I sat on the floor of my room, practically in the fetal position, staring at the door and praying a cop would arrive soon. I noticed the light shining from the gap under my door had stopped. The man was standing outside my door. There are no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow shift slightly across the gap. I stayed curled up, staring at that sliver of light, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator kept asking, "Hello, sir, are you there?" I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I had, I don't think I could have moved my arms to bring the phone to my mouth. Eventually, the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest footsteps creaking on the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It went silent for minutes while I sat there frozen. Finally, I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering the house. Relief washed over me. I opened the door to see the 2 of them standing there and almost cried. These days, my parents don't leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock in the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares sometimes, and my heart races whenever I see someone standing completely still, but I'm doing okay. Even after working with sketch artists and looking at lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea who he was or what he wanted, but regardless, let's not meet ever again. Sorry for the length. I've never typed this out before, but it feels good to share. If anyone's interested, I could provide pictures of the things I tried to describe, minus the man in the kitchen, of course, where I was sitting in my room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. I had just moved into my dream home in Sector 67. Bright walls, spacious rooms, a balcony overlooking a quiet park. It was perfect, exactly what I had always wanted. But there was one problem. The entire lane was empty. Most houses around me were dark, silent. At night, the neighborhood felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped. The very first day I moved in, carrying boxes inside, I felt it, like something cold crawled under my skin, a hand brushing from the inside. I told myself it was just stress, but deep down, it felt like a warning. A week later, the first incident happened. At 2 a.m., my brother and I woke to the sound of heavy furniture being dragged directly above us. We ignored it at first, maybe construction, but the sound came again, night after night, and then it hit us. No one lived above us. In fact, the entire building next door was empty. So where were those sounds coming from? My brother was the first to see something. "I swear someone just walked past me," he said. But when he turned, no one was there. Just that quick flash in his peripheral vision. From that night on, shadows followed us everywhere. In the hallways, the kitchen, even on the balcony, like invisible figures moving just out of sight, reminding us we weren't alone. Then came the night I'll never forget. I woke up, frozen. A hand pressed against my legs. My chest tightened. Sleep paralysis. And that's when I saw it. Someone was sitting on my bed. Not beside it. On it, a dark figure, face blurred, leaning close. Watching me breathe, I tried to scream, but nothing came out. And then, it was gone. But the spot where it sat still felt heavy, as though someone had just stood up. Soon, my brother had his own experience. One night, he woke up frozen, staring at the mirror by his bed, and in the reflection, a man dressed in black stood over him. Hollow eyes, staring, unmoving. My brother tried to call for me, but no sound escaped. And just like that, the figure vanished. That was the night we knew. This wasn't imagination. Something was living with us. From then on, it became routine. Eyes watching from the balcony. Footsteps in empty hallways. Bottles rattling on their own, even. Faucets dripping after being tightly closed. The house was alive, and it was watching us. Then came the call. A friend who stayed over one night phoned me in. "Panic! Was that an earthquake?" she asked. All the bottles in my room just started shaking. That night, around midnight, she heard it, a whisper, right next to her ear. "It's too late. Go to sleep. I'll take care of the house." She left the next morning. She never came back. After that, I had the house cleansed. Rituals, prayers, and slowly, the heaviness lifted. For the first time in months, the house felt light again, peaceful. It's been over a year now, and everything is normal. But sometimes, when the wind rattles my windows at night, I still hear that same whisper in the back of my mind. "It's too late. I'll take care of the house." I bought my first house in 2003 and was over the moon. Shortly after moving in, Two of my neighbors began joking with me about the ghost in my house. Well, I thought they were joking, so I just played along pretending I had seen one, and it was no big deal. Well, as time went on that summer, I met more and more of my neighbors, and they all brought up the same topic. Finally, an elderly woman on the block who was quite kind and friendly told me story after I'd asked her. I knew she wasn't going to screw with my head, which is why I asked in the first place. Turned out the previous owner purchased the home and never lived there because she said it was haunted. Sounds in the night of footsteps and sobbing, and glimpses of a man sitting in the kitchen covered in blood. One of my neighbors helped with the renovations of the house and said that he was putting up drywall when he felt something lift up his dreadlocks. Though I've had paranormal experiences before, it had been years, and by then I just chalked it up to night terrors. One day I went to a small neighborhood video store to rent a movie. I had to fill out a form with my demographic data and then my credit card info. The owner of the store looked at the form and said, "Oh my God, you live in that house." I asked her what she meant, and she explained that her former employee had committed suicide in my house. She came to the house as soon as she'd heard, but the house had been taped off by police as a potential crime scene. She told me that he had just moved into the house with his partner and called his mom because he wanted to invite her over to meet his partner and come out to her. This was in the early 90s when being gay was a big deal. His mother already knew he was gay because he bought a house with a man and disowned him right over the phone. That same week, he received a letter from an HIV testing center stating he had tested positive for HIV. This is when HIV was a death sentence. He then sat at the kitchen table, ate a bowl of cereal, and shot himself in the head with a revolver. Since then, she has had multiple paranormal experiences in the store, with videos flying off shelves and even levitating off shelves. The most I have experienced is sounds at night, sounds of Cheerios being poured into a bowl. I don't eat cereal, and sounds of sobbing in the kitchen. I often awaken to both. I remember my grandmother saying, "When the dead come to you, they want something. Perform an act of charity in their name and pray for them." So I did. I sat down at the kitchen table one night and lit a candle and told him that each night I would recite a novena prayer for him before a lit candle. On the 9th night of the first novena to Saint Anthony, patron saint of lost souls, I heard uncontrollable sobbing. I felt a strong presence of grief and despair, and the sound of hyperventilating breathing, as though someone could not catch their breath. I sat in the presence of this knowing it was not malignant, but rather a connection of intimacy and compassion of which he was in need. For 45 days I said a novena prayer before a lit candle for his soul, and had a mass said in his name. A few times I had awakened to feel his presence standing over my bed, but knew it was not a malignant presence. This still happens from time to time, but less and less frequently. In 2014, my family moved into a house straight out of a horror film. An old, creaking home on the edge of town opposite a cemetery and backed right onto an abandoned hospital. We thought we were starting a new life together as a blended family. Instead, we stepped into 4 years of fear, mystery, and events I still can't explain. A 200 to 300-year-old house in the UK countryside. Stone walls, heavy wooden doors, no windows in the upstairs hallway. Out front, a cemetery. Out back, an abandoned NHS hospital with empty, broken buildings and overgrown grounds. It sounds like the set for a ghost movie, but it was our home. I still drive past it every day, and every time, my stomach tightens. I can't stop thinking about what happened there. The first afternoon we arrived, the air was damp and cold even though it was summer. The garden at the back of our house was separated from the abandoned hospital, property by nothing but a sagging wooden fence. My 2 stepbrothers and I dragged some logs and branches together to make a makeshift football goal. We propped them up against a tree at the bottom of the hospital garden and kicked a ball around for a while. After less than an hour, we got bored and wandered off to explore the ruined hospital grounds. Cracked windows, birds nesting in old doorways, the smell of mold and rot. When we came back, our goal was gone. Well, not gone exactly, but every stick and log had been gathered into perfectly neat piles, like someone had measured and stacked them with precision. We stood frozen. There was no way the logs had just fallen like that. We told our parents. They told us they'd done it to scare us. Years later, they admitted it wasn't them. They'd been just as freaked out, A few months later, my mom and stepdad were gifted a plant when they got married. One day they got angry with us, saying, "Stop watering that plant. You'll kill it." We had no idea what they were talking about. We didn't even know what plant they meant. But every few days they'd move it, hide it, and somehow it would still end up overwatered. The plant began to wither and die. Even now, my brothers swear they never touched it, and I believe them. It felt like something, or someone, in the house was doing it. Then came the night that even my mom couldn't ignore. She doesn't believe in ghosts, never has. But she was standing in my bedroom doorway one evening, chatting to me. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw my younger brother walk from his room at the end of the hall into the bathroom. Totally normal, except when she went downstairs a moment later. Both of my brothers were sitting on the sofa with my stepdad watching football. There was no one else upstairs. That was the first time I saw her face go pale. It wasn't just us. Our two dogs, normally gentle and well-behaved, began acting strangely in one specific spot in the garden. Every night, like clockwork, they would go to that spot, snarl, then whine and cry, lowering themselves to the ground as though someone invisible was shouting at them. The hair on their backs would rise. Their tails would tuck. They'd pull at their leads to get back inside. It was always the same spot. Always at night. I had a wooden sign on the back of my bedroom door. The upstairs hall had no windows, no drafts. Yet every night, after midnight, the sign would begin to bang softly against the door. Not like it was loose, but like someone was knocking. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was my brothers playing a prank. But it happened even when they were away. It happened even when I was wide awake watching it. Those were just a few of the things. There were dozens more. Cold spots. Doors opening when no one was near them. Objects moving. The feeling of being watched. We stayed for 4 years. Then we moved, just a 2-minute walk away. But I still drive past that house every day. And every time I remember, I've even contacted local archives to try and learn more about the property. Who built it? What happened there? Nothing I've found so far explains it. Maybe it was the proximity to the cemetery. Maybe it was the abandoned hospital. Maybe it was the house itself. All I know is that whatever was there, it wanted to be noticed. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who gets paranoid from silence. But during the 2021 lockdown, when I stayed alone at my uncle's house for 2 weeks, silence started to feel like a living thing. He lives on the outskirts of town, in a house surrounded by forest. It's the kind of quiet where even during the day you only hear birds or leaves shifting. At night, it's a black hole. I was 23 then, doing freelance work, treating it like a retreat. The house was beautiful, but the silence had edges, like the walls were listening, like something was always waiting behind it. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I'd just finished watching a thriller on Netflix. I was in bed, scrolling my phone, the only light coming from a small lamp on the nightstand. That's when I heard it, a faint creak from the living room. Old house, I told myself. Wood contracts, houses sigh. But then it came again, louder, rhythmic, like weight shifting across the floorboards. I froze. My first thought was wind, or a branch scratching the siding. But the sound was inside. I muted the TV and held my breath. The creaks stopped. I got up anyway, heart hammering, and cracked the bedroom door open just enough to peek out. The hallway was black, the kind of dark where shadows look thicker. Then I saw it, a flicker, like someone had just passed in front of the porch light. A shadow that shouldn't have been there. I stood perfectly still, straining to hear footsteps, voices, anything, nothing. I hadn't heard the door open, no glass breaking, just the silence. And it was so loud it pressed against my ears like static. My mind started racing. What if someone's inside? What if I'm just imagining it? I backed into the room, shut the door quietly, and grabbed the only thing near me, a tiny pocket knife from my keychain. Completely useless, but it made me feel 1% safer. I sat on the bed like that for what felt like an hour, listening. Every creak of the house became a footstep. Every gust of wind became breathing. I didn't sleep at all. At sunrise, I walked through the house, checking every door and window. Everything looked untouched, until I reached the front door. It was unlocked. I was 100% sure I'd locked it. I remember doing it like a ritual before bed, double-checking, triple-checking. There was no sign of a break-in, nothing missing. But the door was unlocked. That shook me more than the creaking, because it meant one of two things. Either I was losing my mind, or someone had been there. and just left. I've never heard silence the same way since. Now, I'm obsessed with stories like this. Not the movie jump scares. The subtle things. Things moving. Doors unlocking. Breathing where no one should be. The small details you think you're imagining until you live them. It was one of those nights that felt heavier than usual. My parents had gone out of town for a work function, and I had insisted I was fine staying home alone. I was a teenager, old enough to handle myself, or at least that's what I kept telling them. We lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen, so really, what was there to worry about? By the time the clock hit 9 p.m., I was curled up on the couch, the TV flickering in front of me, a bowl of chips beside me, and my phone buzzing occasionally with notifications from friends. Everything felt normal, calm, even boring. That was until I heard the first knock. It was sharp, loud, too deliberate to be a neighbor. At first I froze. You know that weird instinct where your body just refuses to move because your brain can't process what's happening? That's exactly what happened. Then came another knock. Slow this time. 3 solid bangs against the front door. I stood up, heart hammering, and peeked through the side window. Nothing. The porch light was on, but the steps were empty. My hand was trembling as I unlocked the door, only cracking it open a few inches. Hello? My voice barely carried. No answer. The night air was cold, but the silence was colder. I shut the door quickly, locked it, and sat back on the couch, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was kids messing around. Maybe someone had the wrong house. But deep down, my gut told me something was wrong. Not 10 minutes later, the knocking came again. This time it was faster, almost frantic. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. Who's there? A pause, then a man's voice, rough and oddly cheerful. Can you help me? My car broke down. Just need to use your phone. Every instinct in me screamed no. Something about the way he said it. It didn't sound like someone in trouble. It sounded like someone trying to play a role. I shouted back, I'm calling the police. And I really did grab my phone, dialing 911 with shaky hands. The operator's calm voice steadied me as I explained, whispering so the man outside wouldn't hear too much. She told me officers were on their way and to stay inside. Doors locked. I could barely breathe, every second stretching into forever as the knocking turned into pounding. Then, silence. I thought he'd left. I was starting to calm down, pacing back and forth, until I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The back door. I had forgotten to lock the back door earlier in the evening, and that's when I heard it. The faint sound of the back door creaking open. I swear my blood went ice cold. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a lamp, and ran upstairs, slamming my bedroom door shut and pushing my dresser against it. I whispered to the 911 operator, telling her he was inside now. My voice was shaking so badly she had to keep telling me to breathe. Then I heard the footsteps, slow, heavy, each one pressing into the old wooden floorboards of the hallway. He wasn't even trying to be quiet. He wanted me to hear him, and then he laughed. It wasn't loud, more like a low chuckle, but it echoed in the silence of my house. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath, gripping the lamp so tight my knuckles ached. Minutes dragged on. I heard him move closer, the floor groaning under his weight. He stopped right outside my bedroom door. I saw the shadow of his feet through the small gap beneath it. He just stood there. The silence was unbearable. Then, in a voice that made my skin crawl, he whispered, I know you're in there. I didn't respond. Couldn't respond. I just pressed the phone tighter against my ear, hearing the operator telling me, stay calm. Officers are right around the corner. The man rattled the doorknob. Once, twice, slowly at first, then violently shaking it. The dresser shifted slightly with the force. I was nearly in tears, trying not to make a sound, praying he wouldn't break through. Finally, I heard it. Sirens. Faint at first, then louder, closer. The man must have heard them too, because suddenly his shadow disappeared. His footsteps retreated, quick now, almost running. Moments later, red and blue lights flashed across my window. The pounding on the front door this time wasn't him, it was the police. I ran down, opened the door, and nearly collapsed into their arms. They searched the whole house, every room, every corner. The back door had been forced open, but the man was gone. To this day, they never caught him. They don't know who he was, what he wanted, or how long he'd been planning it. But I still hear his voice sometimes, that whisper through the door. I know you're in there, and I'll never forget the laugh.